So today we need to go backwards on this car and fix a few things that shouldn't be broken. The first thing is the brand new 4-speed Hurst shifter got stuck in second gear for the second time. The first time I got it home and I just had to tap it at a second, and the nut that was on the transmission, on the rod on the transmission, was loose. So tighten it down. Figured it was just a quirk of having something new. You know, you gotta check new stuff. And it happened again the other day and it was a real problem. So I guess I'll try some Loctite because the lock washers don't seem to be working. And the second thing is, this front carb, the choke was stuck on a little bit. And I'll pull this off and show you how that was stuck. So this bracket on this linkage was actually bent over where it was hitting the choke horn, so it wouldn't come down all the way to open it up. So it was basically stuck like right there. So I tuned it based on that, and it ran okay, but something seemed off. So I started looking at the carbs and I noticed that after it was warmed up, that this rod was here and the back one was all the way down, kind of like this one is now. And it shouldn't be all the way down. Let me see what happens when I start this. Both these chokes should close. This warmed up, make sure both chokes come off. Okay, now that it's warmed up, I'm going to check the timing, put a vacuum gauge on it, set the idle mixture screws, and then set the throttle. That's the plan. Let's see if that works. I'm hoping I didn't foul any plugs driving around with the front choke stuck on. I might have. I don't know. Let's see what we can do. Getting these plugs out is a pain in the butt. I mean, these headers are TTIs and they're the bigger ones. I wanted the smaller ones, but they were like a year out, year and a half, I think, at the time. And these were on the shelf, so I just took them. And boy, are they big. And boy, are those plugs a pain in the butt to get out. All right, let me find my timing mark. I don't have timing tape, I don't think. I thought I bought another roll of timing tape, but let's see what we can find down on that balancer. I have a clear shot to the balancer on that Barracuda, and that is an A-body. That is a smaller car. I have the same setup with this alternator, and I just don't have a clear shot. So let me see if my timing light can catch that timing mark coming around. Just to get this on camera for my own documentation. This mark, that black mark, is not where the rotor should be when it's on the number one cylinder. It's actually a little below that. So the rotor is pretty much dead on. And when I look at the timing mark, which is extremely difficult to get on camera, it's right about at 10 before. And when I threw the timing light on it, it looked more like 20 before, which isn't crazy. I mean, I think the book says 10 degrees before top dead center. A lot of people online will say 10 to 15 and then go from there. But I remember this motor with the Holley, what it was, F750 or 850. I had it set at like 20 degrees before top dead center. Somewhere in there, 10 to 20. And I know the Barracuda was running 20 degrees at idle, you know, base timing. That motor's built. This motor, you know, it's an HP block. I know it has a purple cam in it. It's not a passenger car 383. You know, it was built to go. I also cleaned up this cap. I had forgotten, and I always forget, these MSD caps, or maybe just, you know, HEI caps in general, they get pretty fouled out. So I cleaned all the posts and cleaned the rotor, and I know for a fact that that Barracuda, you know, once the cap got corroded or, you know, deposits built up on the posts and the rotor, it would run like garbage. And I would always replace the cap, and I would always keep a cap in stock. And I actually have 2 other caps that are used, but they're not horrible. I keep them around because when they go, there's just no fixing it. You need another cap. So I'm going to put this back together, check the timing. I might back the timing off a little bit, but let's see how it runs with this cap not garbage. Okay, so the goal is to adjust the mixture screws until you get the highest idle, and then back it down a bit. I think that's kind of how I was taught. Plug off the vacuum advance, and I've got this hooked up to where the vacuum advance is hooked up. There's no ports on the tunnel ram, so this is what I have to use. Alright, so let's adjust all 4 mixture screws. 3 turns out on each. I'm at about 8. A little above. I'm going to come out a little farther and see what it does. That's 3.5 turns. And it's still hovering, but hovering under 8, where it was hovering above 8. So that's the highest I'm getting. That's 2.5 turns out on all of them. 3 turns out, it went below 8. 2 turns out, it was like 6 or 7 or something. So I'm going to disconnect this, hook up the vacuum advance, and set the idle. And we're running even without touching the idle. It's idling below 1,000, which is perfect. So let's pull the vacuum advance off and we'll see where it's at. So we're back up to 1170, 60. Let's turn on the idle and hopefully it'll idle nice. We're at 9, 30, 40, 20. That's where I like to be, right under 1,000. Let's hope it runs as good as it sounds. It's actually idling about 860, 70 now. After I just kicked the throttle there a bit. That's pretty good. That Barracuda idles around that all day long. But that's fuel injected with timing control. For a tunnel ram to idle at 800 like that, 850, that's really good. I hope it runs as good as it idles. Let's see if it'll start back up. No problem. Okay, so I'm not the smartest guy. I am not a mechanic, but this is how I tune these cars to make them run. So I don't know if you could hear anything I said, so I'll just go over it. First thing I do is set top dead center, make sure the distributor is in the correct spot, number one cylinder. What I usually do is if I want 10 degrees to start for the base timing is I'll set the balancer at 10 degrees and then I'll put the rotor right on the number one plug so it's firing on it when it's 10 degrees before top dead center. Then I'll start it and set the timing. So, make sure it's at 10 or 15 or 20 or whatever you want. I like this thing. It seems to run better, higher, so 15, 20 even. I don't have timing tape on the balancer, but I'm just going by ear and what I know. Then I'll take the vacuum advance line off. I'll plug the distributor and I'll put the vacuum gauge on it. And I'll adjust the idle mixture screws so there's 2 on each carb. And I'll usually start by turning them out like 2 turns. And then I'll go to 2.5 and then 3. If I have to come in, I'll go in, to 1.5, but I don't think I've ever done that. So this one it had the most vacuum at 2.5 or 3. I think it was 2.5. 3, it was just below 8. 2.5, it was fluttering above 8, just barely hitting off 9. 2, it was closer to 6 or 7. So once that's done, I'll put the vacuum advance line back on and then set the actual idle. This is the last thing I do. And I usually like that to be below 1,000 because I don't want to be sitting at a red light with this thing idling like crazy just because I can't tune it right. So after that, and it was running around 850, 60, touching on 900 RPMs. I'll turn it off and make sure it starts. Because if it has trouble cranking and it won't fire, then your timing's probably off. So it's a little cloudy in here, at least it feels that way. A little exhaust from letting it run in this garage, and there's not a lot of ventilation. It's been raining out, so I had to kind of do it in here. But it sounds like it's running good. So I'd like to take it for a rip and make sure, but it's raining and I don't want to get squirrely and do something stupid. It seems snappy though with the throttle. It didn't feel like that before. So I'm hopeful. I mean, if it lets up, I'll take it out and see what it does. But it's hard to hold the camera with a 4-speed. So I'll probably put the air cleaners back on. And I'll fix that first, second gear rod. I don't have to show that. This thing is so hot under there. Those headers are so hot. It's ridiculous. On the side of the road the other day, I nearly burned my arm off trying to fix this thing. Luckily, some guy nearby had a floor jack that barely worked and a bunch of cinder blocks. And then the lady across the street came over and gave us bottles of water because it was like 90 degrees. Okay. So, hopefully the next shot will be me driving this thing and it running great. Let's see what happens. Just a quick PSA on this scoop. Do not buy it. Stay away from it. The problem with this scoop, one of the many problems, well, there's multiple problems. The base plate is held on, both base plates are held on by the air cleaner. So you need the stud with the nut. The air cleaner element actually holds this base plate on. The base plate, you have to thread screws up through these slots into the bottom of this. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 8 of them. There's no way I'm using 8 of them. The problem is the air cleaners don't line up with the spaces. So trying to get this air cleaner through this slot is a pain in the butt. You can't send it through here and bring it forward because the rear one is hitting here. So you have to get the rear one through the rear, the front one through the front, and it's it's a pain in the butt. Now I could probably take a Dremel and, you know, grind this all out and find a happy medium, but then the bottom line is, once you get this on, if you have a problem like I did, where the choke was staying open and I didn't know it, I had to take this off. I had to disassemble the whole thing just to get to this. And the other thing is, these, I had to cut this one, the front of it off. And when I put these on, I have to push this back and I have to pull this one forward so I even have a chance of these lining up. I was actually thinking, well, maybe I could just take this front thing out, but it's bolted on from the rear. And I really didn't want to take it out because as you're coming down the road, this thing is sucking in everything. And these little paper elements, I mean, they're just not hardy enough. So I will be getting air cleaners for this. Probably the same as the ones on this. These are K&N filters that came with tops. But I put this on top, and sometimes I run it without this newspaper scoop on it. So I keep them with the car. But these are just, you know, independent of each other. You can take one off, the other one off, both of them off. It's just not a problem. These birds are going nuts. All right, let's see if it'll fit. I don't think I didn't push it. I didn't push them together. I'm not putting it on. Some like them. I guess they look cool. It's kind of too short, I think. It's not tall enough. I mean, if it was taller where you could get your hand in here and put actual, you know, like K&N filters on, that would be cool. Where you don't have to take this scoop off to get to the filters. But, I mean, even if I took this front off, it's up against the top. So you can't even really reach in there and undo that nut. And you certainly can't put a wing nut on it. After tuning it, I set the idle mixture screws, set the timing and all that, took it for a ride, and it ran better, but it wasn't doing very well. So what I did was, the timing was at about 15 degrees, so I upped it to 20, and now it runs good, drives well, doesn't have a lot of power off the line, which is you can expect from a taller end. Right around 2 grand, 2200 RPM. It just takes off and it just keeps pulling and pulling and pulling. So I think I might want the 4-barrel back just because of that, you know, initial power. I kind of like that better with this car, but I'm gonna tune it a little more, maybe change the timing a little bit more here and there. I'm gonna keep this on it for the rest of the season, definitely. See if we can get it to run better. And if not, we'll go back to the 4-barrel. But that's it for this one.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
And subscribe.